The first story is called An Ordinary Night That Turned into a Nightmare.
It was a quiet night, the kind that gives no reason for concern. The streets were calm, almost empty, with only a few distant headlights passing by now and then. The air was cool, carrying the faint smell of asphalt and dust, the kind that settles after a long day. Nothing about the night suggested danger. Nothing hinted that within a short span of time, everything would change. The man stepped out of his apartment building just after 9 in the evening. He closed the door behind him and stood for a moment, adjusting his jacket. The hallway light flickered briefly as the door locked. Outside, the streetlights cast long yellow shadows across the pavement. The world felt slow and still, as if it had paused for the night. He had done this many times before. A short walk, a few minutes of fresh air, a way to clear his head after a long day. There was no urgency in his steps. His hands rested loosely in his pockets as he began walking down the sidewalk. The sound of his shoes against the concrete echoed softly, the only sound nearby. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then fell silent again. The neighborhood was familiar. Every corner, every turn, every building felt known. There was comfort in that familiarity. Comfort often creates a false sense of safety. As he walked, his thoughts wandered. Work, small plans for the weekend, ordinary thoughts that fill the mind when there is nothing to fear. His phone vibrated briefly in his pocket. He stopped, pulled it out, and glanced at the screen. A message. Nothing important, nothing urgent. He replied quickly and slipped the phone back into his pocket. That was when he noticed the side street ahead, a narrow road branching off from the main path. It was a shortcut, one he had used many times before. It cut through a quieter section of the neighborhood and saved a few minutes. During the day, it was unremarkable. At night, it was darker, with fewer streetlights and longer stretches of shadow. He slowed for a moment, not because he was afraid, but because his mind registered the difference in lighting, the sudden drop in ambient noise. The main road behind him was still visible, still active, still safe. He hesitated, then he turned. The moment his foot stepped onto the side street, the atmosphere shifted. The sounds from the main road faded almost immediately. The streetlights were spaced farther apart here, leaving pockets of darkness between them. The buildings on either side were older, closer together, their windows mostly dark. His footsteps sounded louder now. Each step echoed slightly, bouncing off the walls around him. The air felt cooler here, heavier somehow. He pulled his jacket a little tighter around himself and continued walking. Nothing happened. For several seconds, everything remained quiet. Then he noticed the flickering streetlight ahead. It buzzed softly, casting uneven light across the road. Shadows stretched and shrank as the light blinked. He kept walking, his pace steady, his posture relaxed. Halfway down the street, something caught his attention. A shape ahead. At first, it didn't register as anything unusual, just a darker patch against the darkness. As he got closer, the shape became clearer. A person standing still. The figure was positioned near the edge of the street, partially under the streetlight. They weren't moving. No phone, no cigarette, no visible gestures. Just standing there, facing slightly away. He slowed his pace. Not out of fear, but out of instinct. People usually moved. They walked. They checked their phones. They did something. Standing completely still, late at night, on an empty side street, felt wrong. The distance between them shortened. The man considered crossing to the other side of the street. He considered turning back, but the thought passed quickly. He didn't want to appear suspicious or paranoid. He told himself it was nothing. Maybe someone waiting for a ride. Maybe someone checking directions. He kept walking. As he drew closer, the figure shifted, just slightly, enough to confirm they were aware of him. The man's breathing changed. It became shallower. His heart rate increased, not dramatically, but noticeably. His hand brushed against his phone in his pocket. The streetlight flickered again. In that brief moment of uneven light, the figure turned fully toward him, and then everything happened at once. The figure moved. Fast, much faster than expected. The man stepped back instinctively, his foot catching slightly on the uneven pavement. He lost balance for a split second. That second was enough. The distance between them closed. The quiet street erupted into sudden chaos. Movement, noise, confusion. The man tried to shout, but the sound caught in his throat. His phone slipped from his pocket and hit the ground, the screen flashing briefly before going dark. He stumbled backward, his back hitting the cold surface of a wall. His senses struggled to keep up with what was happening. The calm of moments before felt unreal, distant, as if it belonged to another night entirely. The streetlight above flickered again, plunging parts of the scene into shadow. His thoughts raced. This isn't happening. This doesn't make sense. This was supposed to be normal, but reality didn't slow down to let him process it. His heart pounded violently against his chest. His breathing became erratic. Every sound felt amplified. His own breath, the scrape of shoes, the rush of blood in his ears. Time stretched. Seconds felt longer than they should have. His focus narrowed to survival, to movement, to instinct. He reacted without thinking, driven by fear and adrenaline. The world outside that street ceased to exist. No passing cars, no nearby houses, no immediate help. Only the dim light, the shadows, and the chaos unfolding in that narrow space. Eventually, the movement stopped. The noise faded. The street returned to silence. The man remained where he was for a moment, his body shaking, his thoughts disordered. The flickering streetlight buzzed overhead, indifferent to what had just occurred beneath it. When he finally moved, it was slow and unsteady. He reached for his phone on the ground, his hands trembling. The screen was cracked, the display unresponsive. He looked around, his eyes scanning the street, every shadow suddenly threatening. Nothing moved. The side street looked exactly as it had before. Empty, quiet, harmless. The contrast was unsettling. When help arrived later, the street offered little explanation. No clear witnesses, no immediate answers. Just a stretch of road that looked ordinary in every possible way. By the next morning, people walked through that street without hesitation. Cars passed by. The streetlight continued to flicker as it always had. Nothing about the place suggested what had happened there. But for the man who walked down that street that night, nothing would ever feel ordinary again.
The second story is called "The House Went Quiet Before I Was Ready."
I noticed it when the sound of the heater stopped. Not the usual click when it shuts off. Just silence. Too sudden. Too clean. I was standing in the kitchen, barefoot on the cold tile, holding a glass of water. The house had been making its normal nighttime noises all evening. The low hum of the heater, the faint ticking in the walls. Somewhere far off, a car passing on the main road. Then it all dropped away at once. I stayed still, the glass hovering near my mouth, listening. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt occupied. I remember thinking it was strange how clearly I could hear my own breathing, slow, even, louder than it should have been. The kind of awareness you usually only get when someone else is nearby and quiet. I didn't move right away. I didn't want to break whatever balance had settled in the room. The kitchen light above the sink buzzed faintly, casting a soft yellow circle on the counter. Beyond that, the rest of the house was dark. I stood there longer than made sense, waiting for the heater to click back on. It didn't. Eventually, I set the glass down and leaned my hands against the counter. The surface was cold, smooth, grounding. I told myself it was just the thermostat. Old systems do that. They pause, they misread the temperature. Still, I didn't turn around. The feeling wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was a mild pressure, like the moment before someone speaks behind you. A sense of anticipation without direction. When I finally did turn, there was nothing there. Just the dark hallway leading back toward the bedrooms. The door to the spare room was closed, as always. The bathroom door stood open, a thin strip of light spilling out from the nightlight near the sink. Everything looked normal. That should have been the end of it. I've lived in that house for 5 years. A small, single-story place in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Tree-lined streets, lawns trimmed short, the kind of area where nothing ever really happens. I bought it after my divorce, mostly because it was close to work and cheap enough that I didn't have to think too hard about it. Most nights were the same. Dinner alone, a little television, maybe reading in bed until I fell asleep. Quiet routines, predictable. That night hadn't been different until it was. I finished my water, rinsed the glass, and turned off the kitchen light. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed the temperature right away. The air felt heavier, cooler than it should have been. Not dramatically cold, just enough that my arms prickled slightly. I paused near the bathroom and glanced inside. The mirror above the sink caught the edge of my reflection. My face looked tired, neutral, the way it always does at the end of the day. Nothing seemed out of place. I kept walking. In the bedroom, I changed into a sweatshirt and sweatpants, then sat on the edge of the bed to put on socks. The room was quiet except for the faint rustle of fabric. Outside, the streetlight cast long shadows across the curtains, barely moving. That's when I heard it, a sound from the hallway. Not footsteps, not quite. More like someone shifting their weight on carpet. A soft compression, then stillness. I froze with one sock halfway on. The sound hadn't come from the bathroom. It was closer to the living room end of the hall, near the front door. I listened. Nothing else followed. I stayed seated for a long time, my foot hovering just above the floor. I told myself it could have been the house settling, wood contracting, pipes adjusting. Houses make sounds, especially at night. Still, I didn't move. When I finally stood, I did it slowly, deliberately, keeping my breathing steady. I walked to the bedroom door and stood there, hand resting on the frame, listening again. The hallway was empty. I turned off the bedroom light and got into bed. I lay on my back, staring at the ceiling, counting breaths. The heater still hadn't turned back on. The house felt too quiet, like it was holding something in. Sleep came eventually, but it was shallow. I woke up several times during the night without knowing why. Each time the same thought surfaced before I could stop it. Something is off. In the morning, the heater was running again. Warm air flowed through the vents like nothing had happened. Sunlight filled the kitchen. The neighborhood outside looked unchanged. I went to work, distracted but functional. The day passed without incident. By the time I drove home, the unease from the night before felt distant, almost embarrassing. That evening, I made dinner and watched television. The heater hummed steadily. The house felt normal again, almost. Later, as I stood in the living room turning off lights, I noticed the front door. It was unlocked. I stared at it for a few seconds, my hand still on the light switch. I was careful about locking the door. Always had been. It was muscle memory at this point. Lock, check, tug once. I stepped closer and turned the knob. It opened easily. I stood there in the doorway, looking out at the porch. The porch light was on. The steps were empty. The yard beyond was still. I locked the door and stood there longer than necessary, listening to the quiet outside. That night, I dreamed of standing in the hallway, watching a shadow move across the wall. When I woke up, the heater was off again. This time, I didn't go back to sleep. Over the next few days, small things began to add up. Nothing dramatic, just inconsistencies. The bathroom door left open when I was sure I'd closed it. The porch light on when I didn't remember turning it on. A faint smell in the living room, like cold air that had been outside too long. I checked the thermostat. It was working fine. No errors, no odd settings. I checked the doors and windows every night, all locked, all secure. Still, the feeling lingered. The sound returned on the fourth night, that same soft shift in the hallway, that same sense of presence without movement. This time, it came from closer to the bedroom. I didn't get up. I stayed in bed, eyes open, listening to the silence that followed. It felt like waiting. After that, I started leaving lights on at night. Not all of them, just enough to soften the dark. I slept with the bedroom door closed. The heater cycled on and off more irregularly now, sometimes stopping for long stretches. The temperature drops were subtle but noticeable. The house felt colder than it should have, especially in the hallway. One evening, I stood in the kitchen again, almost exactly where I had been the first night. The same light buzzing overhead, the same quiet pressing in around me. This time, when the heater stopped, I didn't wait. I turned toward the hallway immediately. The bathroom light was on. I was certain I'd turned it off earlier. I walked toward it slowly, my footsteps soft against the carpet. As I reached the doorway, I paused. The mirror showed the empty hallway behind me. Then, very slowly, something shifted at the edge of the reflection. Not a shape, not a figure, just a subtle darkening, like a shadow settling where it hadn't been before. I didn't move. I watched my own reflection breathe, watched my shoulders rise and fall. The shadow in the mirror stayed still. I reached out and turned off the bathroom light. The darkness swallowed the reflection instantly. I went to bed after that without looking into the mirror again. That night I woke up to the sound of the front door, not opening, just adjusting. A soft movement, like someone touching the handle. I lay there, heart steady, listening. There was no follow-up sound, no footsteps, no door closing. Just the heater humming quietly again. In the morning, the front door was still locked. I didn't tell anyone about it. Not friends, not coworkers. It didn't feel like something that could be explained properly. The words would make it sound bigger than it was, or smaller. Instead, I paid attention. I started noticing how the house felt when I entered it after work. Some evenings it felt empty. Other evenings it felt expectant, like something had already been there for a while. The mirrors bothered me more now, not because they showed anything wrong, but because they showed nothing at all. One night I stood in the hallway and watched myself in the bathroom mirror for a long time. My reflection matched me perfectly. No delay, no distortion. Still, I couldn't shake the sense that it was watching me back. The sound in the hallway stopped after a while. The heater returned to normal. The door stayed locked. Life settled into a new version of normal. But I never stopped checking. Even now, when the house goes quiet too suddenly, I feel it again. That same pressure, that same sense of something pausing, listening, waiting for me to notice. Nothing has happened since. That's what makes it worse, because whatever it was didn't need to rush. It already knows the house, and it knows I'm paying attention.
The final story is called My Girlfriend Died, but She Still Texts Me. I noticed it because the phone vibrated without making a sound. I was sitting on the edge of my bed, lights off, the room lit only by the faint glow coming in through the window. The street outside was quiet, too quiet for that time of night. No cars passing, no voices, just the distant hum of something electrical, maybe a transformer down the block. The vibration came again. I hadn't enabled silent mode. I never did at night. I liked hearing notifications, even meaningless ones. The sound grounded me. I picked up the phone and looked at the screen. Her name was there. Not a nickname, not a number. Her full name exactly as I'd saved it years ago. For a moment, I didn't react at all. I just stared at it, waiting for my mind to correct itself, to realize I'd misread it, to notice some small detail that would make it make sense. Nothing changed. The notification preview showed a single line. "Did you get home okay?" I didn't open the message. I didn't swipe it away. I just sat there, phone resting in my hand, feeling the familiar weight of it while everything else in the room seemed to recede. She had died 6 months earlier. I didn't think that right away. My mind didn't jump there. It hovered around the edges of the thought, circling it carefully, as if approaching too directly would make it real again. I locked the phone and set it face down on the bed. The room felt colder after that. I waited for another vibration. It didn't come. The quiet returned, pressing in from all sides. I listened for sounds from outside, for anything that would re-anchor me in the moment. There was nothing. Eventually, I picked the phone up again and unlocked it. The message was still there, unread. I told myself there had to be an explanation, a delayed text, a glitch, someone spoofing a number. Apps do strange things sometimes. Technology fails in small, unpredictable ways. I opened the message. It showed as delivered, not read. The typing indicator wasn't there. There was no follow-up. Just that one line sitting in the thread beneath months of silence. I scrolled up without meaning to. The last message before that was mine. Sent the day before her funeral. "I'll bring the jacket you left here." She never read it. I stared at the space between those messages longer than I should have. The gap felt wider than time alone could explain. I didn't reply. I placed the phone back down and stood up, pacing the small bedroom, trying to burn off the sudden tightness in my chest. The floor creaked softly under my steps. Familiar sounds. Normal sounds. I stopped near the window and looked out at the street. Everything was still. After a while, I convinced myself it was some kind of system error. Old messages resurfacing, contacts syncing incorrectly. I'd heard stories like that before. Rare, but not impossible. I went to bed without responding. Sleep didn't come easily. Sometime in the early morning, the phone vibrated again. This time, it made a sound. The sound pulled me out of sleep immediately. It wasn't loud, just the default notification tone. Soft, familiar. The kind of sound I'd heard thousands of times before without thinking about it. This time, it felt invasive. I lay there for a few seconds, staring into the dark, listening for it again. My heart rate stayed steady. I wasn't panicking. I felt alert in a way that sleep usually dulls. The phone didn't vibrate again. I reached over and picked it up. The screen lit my face brighter than I expected. Her name was there again. Another message. I didn't open it right away. I sat up slowly, resting my feet on the floor, grounding myself in the feel of the carpet. I needed to be awake enough to know what I was seeing. I unlocked the phone. "Why didn't you answer?" That was it. No emojis, no punctuation beyond the question mark. Exactly how she used to text when she was checking in on me. Not upset, not playful, just straightforward. The timestamp showed it had been sent less than a minute earlier. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. 6 months. That was how long it had been since the accident. Long enough that the shock had settled into something quieter. Long enough that I'd started to adjust to the absence in small ways, like not reaching for my phone when something reminded me of her. This wasn't one of those moments. I locked the phone again and set it on the nightstand, farther away than before. I sat there in the dark, listening to the faint sounds of the building around me. Pipes, air moving through vents. A distant siren somewhere in the city. I told myself I wasn't going to respond. That decision felt important, like a boundary. If it was a glitch, responding might encourage it. If it was someone messing with me, they'd lose interest. If it was something else, something I didn't want to consider, then responding felt like stepping into it willingly. I lay back down and forced myself to close my eyes. Sleep didn't return. When morning came, the phone was silent. No new messages, no missed calls. I checked the thread anyway. The messages were still there. I read them again, slower this time. There were no spelling mistakes, no awkward phrasing, no sign that someone unfamiliar with her habits had written them. I didn't reply. I went to work like normal. The day moved forward in its usual way. Emails, conversations that required attention, coffee breaks. For a few hours at a time, I managed to forget about the phone in my pocket. Then, during lunch, it vibrated again. No sound this time, just the vibration. I didn't look at it immediately. I finished chewing, swallowed, took a sip of water. I was aware of my own movements in a way that felt detached, like I was watching myself go through the motions. When I finally checked, there was another message. "Are you upset with me?" That one hit differently. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't strange. It was familiar in a way that bypassed logic. She used to ask that exact question when I went quiet longer than usual. Not accusatory, just checking. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering above the keyboard. I didn't type anything. I locked the phone and put it face down on the table. The rest of the day passed in fragments. I caught myself checking reflections in windows, watching my phone screen light up, even when it hadn't. My body stayed calm, but my thoughts kept looping back to the same point. Someone, or something, was trying to start a conversation. That evening, when I got home, the apartment felt quieter than usual. I turned on lights as I moved from room to room, not out of fear, out of habit. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter and walked away from it. I made dinner, ate standing up. The phone didn't move. Afterward, I sat on the couch and waited. It took almost an hour. The vibration was gentle, brief. I didn't look right away. When I finally did, the message was longer. I had a weird dream about you last night. You were standing in the kitchen and wouldn't look at me. I read it twice. She used to tell me about her dreams like that. Casual, as if they were observations rather than something meaningful. She believed dreams didn't mean anything unless you tried too hard to make them mean something. My hands felt steady as I typed. I think someone is using your number. I stared at the message before sending it. Then I deleted it. I sat there for a long time, phone in my lap, the glow of the screen lighting the room. Eventually, without fully deciding to, I typed something else. Who is this? The message sent immediately. There was no delay, no loading indicator. The reply came less than 10 seconds later. It's me. I didn't breathe for a moment after that. I stared at the words until they lost shape. It's me. No explanation. No clarification. Just the statement, sitting there on the screen like it had always belonged there. I locked the phone without responding and set it on the coffee table. I leaned back into the couch and looked at the ceiling, counting the faint cracks in the paint, focusing on anything that wasn't the thought pressing at the edges of my mind. I told myself I wasn't going to engage anymore. Whatever this was, it wasn't her. It couldn't be. That was the one certainty I still had. I'd stood at the hospital. I'd signed paperwork. I'd watched people lower her into the ground. There were too many witnesses. Too much reality layered on top of the memory. I stayed on the couch until the light outside the windows faded completely. The city settled into its nighttime rhythm. Distant traffic. Someone laughing somewhere below. The ordinary sounds made the apartment feel safer. The phone didn't move. Around 10, I picked it up again. The message thread was unchanged. No new texts, no typing indicator. Just the last line staring back at me. It's me. I went to bed without replying. That night, I dreamed of my phone ringing from another room. I could hear it clearly, but every time I tried to move toward it, the sound drifted farther away, echoing down a hallway that didn't exist in my apartment. I woke up before dawn, heart steady, mouth dry. The phone was on the nightstand, exactly where I'd left it. There were 3 new messages. They'd come in over the course of the night, spaced out by hours. I don't like when you ignore me. I don't understand what I did. Can you please answer? I sat up slowly, letting the weight of the morning settle around me. The messages weren't frantic. They weren't angry. They read the way she used to sound when she was confused, trying to fix something she didn't think should be broken. That familiarity was the worst part. I took the phone into the bathroom and set it face down on the counter. I turned on the shower, letting the water run hot, filling the small room with steam and noise. I needed to feel something immediate, physical. When I stepped out, towel around my waist, the mirror was fogged over. I wiped a clear patch and looked at my reflection. I looked the same, tired, a little older, nothing out of place. I got dressed and left for work without touching the phone again. By noon, I had 5 more messages. They weren't accusatory. They weren't demanding. They were observations. I saw the jacket you used to wear. You still take the long way home. You never liked that coffee place near your office. I stopped reading after that. Those weren't things anyone could guess from social media. They weren't things she'd ever posted about. They were details pulled from shared routines, from habits that had existed only between us. I turned the phone off. For the first time since this started, the silence felt intentional, controlled. I went through the rest of the workday with the phone powered down in my bag, resisting the urge to check it. When I turned it back on that evening, the messages flooded in all at once. There were too many to read quickly. Paragraphs, apologies, questions. Long pauses marked by timestamps, hours apart. One message stood out. "I don't know where I am. Can you tell me where I am?" I sat at the kitchen table with the phone in my hands, the overhead light casting a sharp circle around me. The rest of the apartment was dark. I thought about deleting the thread, blocking the number, changing my phone altogether. Instead, I typed, "You're not here." The reply came slower this time. "I know, I can tell." My fingers hovered over the screen. "How?" Several seconds passed. "I don't feel cold." I didn't respond after that. The messages slowed down over the next few days. They didn't stop, but they became less frequent, shorter, less certain. Sometimes they asked questions. Sometimes they just stated things. "I can hear you breathe when you're asleep." "I think I'm close to you." "I don't remember leaving." I stopped sleeping with the phone in the bedroom. I left it charging in the kitchen overnight, door closed. Even then, I found myself waking up, listening for vibrations that never came. One night, while brushing my teeth, I noticed the bathroom light flicker. Just once. I froze, foam in my mouth, eyes locked on the mirror. The light steadied. The reflection matched me perfectly. Still, I rinsed quickly and turned the light off, leaving the bathroom in darkness. When I checked the phone later, there was one new message. "I don't like the dark." I left the bathroom light on after that. It wasn't something I decided consciously. I just noticed later that I hadn't turned it off. The soft glow spilled into the hallway, cutting the apartment into two halves, one lit, one dark. I stayed on the lit side. I didn't reply to the message. "I don't like the dark." I read it once, then again, then set the phone face down on the table. I could feel the impulse to respond rising in me, the same reflex that used to kick in when she sounded uncomfortable or unsure. I recognized it for what it was and let it pass. The next message didn't come for almost a full day. That absence felt deliberate. I went through my routine carefully. Work, groceries, dinner, television for noise. I avoided silence as much as possible. When I noticed the apartment growing too quiet, I turned something on. Anything. That night, just after midnight, the phone vibrated once. I picked it up immediately. "I remember the sound of your apartment." I sat on the couch, elbows on my knees, phone glowing in my hands. "What sound?" I typed before I could stop myself. The reply came slower than usual. "The way it goes quiet when you turn everything off." I deleted my message history with shaking fingers, then realized that didn't erase anything on her end, whatever her end was. The thread repopulated as soon as another message came in. "I don't think I'm supposed to be here," it said. That was the first time the wording shifted. Less familiar, less confident. I didn't respond. The next few messages came over the following days, spaced out and uneven. Sometimes she sounded like herself. Sometimes she sounded like someone trying to remember how she used to sound. "I miss your voice." I don't know how long it's been. Something feels wrong when I stop thinking. I stopped charging my phone overnight. I powered it down completely before bed, then turned it back on in the morning. The messages still came through eventually, queued up and waiting. One evening I came home to find the bathroom light off. I stood in the doorway, staring down the hallway, trying to remember if I'd turned it off that morning. I hadn't. I turned it back on and left it that way. Later that night, as I sat in bed reading with the lamp on, the phone buzzed again. "I can see the light." I sat up straighter. "What light?" I typed, then erased it before sending. Another message appeared. The one you leave on now? I didn't sleep after that. I spent the night on the couch, TV on low, lights on in every room. Around 3 in the morning, the messages stopped entirely. No vibrations, no notifications, just silence. In the morning, I checked the phone. There was one final message, time-stamped just before sunrise. I think I'm forgetting things again. I stared at it for a long time. That was the last message I ever received from her number. I changed phones a week later. New number, new account. I didn't transfer the old data. I told myself it was practical, necessary. The new phone has never vibrated at night. But sometimes, when I leave a light on without realizing it, I catch myself wondering who else might notice, and whether silence, once learned, is something that ever really forgets.